A former Ifugao congressman seeks to represent indigenous people as he guns for a Senate seat in next year's polls. Let's get up close with senatorial aspirant Teddy Bagila. Teddy, thank you so much for joining us. You were elected a lawmaker in 2010, and before Congress, you served as Ifugao governor for 2 terms and as a mayor from 1995 to the year 2000. Bakit mo gustong tumakbo para sa Senado?
Well, as you mentioned, I would like to represent the indigenous people or the sectors who normally do not have adequate and effective representation in the Senate. Kasi if you look at the profile of the Senate, that's the political elite that we have in the Philippines. A lot of political dynasties, big business, celebrities. But we don't have voices from the marginalized, indigenous peoples included. Kasama na rin dyan yung mga magsasaka. Because while I'm not claiming to be a farmer, but I have fought for agrarian reform beneficiaries' rights of persons with disabilities, in the bills that I have pushed in Congress. So sa akin, this is a fight for people who do not normally have strong voice in the Senate.
So, Teddy, ano masasabi mo sa mga kandidato who say they represent marginalized groups but they're not members of this group?
Yes, precisely. That's also the reason why we don't have a lot of progressive laws being passed in the Senate, because the interests are mostly with the elite, the people who are in power both politically and economically. Kaya nga, we need, for instance, to solve the problems of the agricultural sector. Kadalasan, the solution is band-aid solutions like price clarification. But we don't address the roots of the problem, which is one-to-one conversion of prime agricultural lands, which is the lack of agricultural investments in the agricultural sector in terms of infrastructure, in terms of credit assistance and capacity building to farmers. That requires very progressive legislation that addresses systemic problems within the industry. Pero sa ngayon, because the people who are in the Senate are supposed to be passing legislation to address problems of various sectors, are there to protect their own interests, which is political dynasties and big business.
And you mentioned about the agricultural industry, no? This comprises a large chunk of our economy. At ang ating mga magsasaka, Teddy, have been suffering due to this COVID-19 pandemic. What should the government do to crack down on smuggled vegetables coming from China, which leaves Filipino farmers at the losing end?
Yeah, that's very important, fighting smuggling, which is not just a recent phenomenon. That's happened in the past. Every time na pumapasok ang smuggled Chinese goods, ang kawawa talaga is the farmers directly. Especially from my region, because my region, the Cordilleras, produces vegetables, highland vegetables, for Metro Manila markets. So I think there has to be a stronger enforcement of the laws. It's a matter really of enforcing the law. There's always a law against smuggling. So kailangan palakasin pa natin yung pag-prevent natin ng smuggled goods. Also at the same time, I think it's high time that we look into the industry as a whole, the vegetable industry, because it isn't really resilient at all. It's always subject to climatic changes, to natural disasters, to smuggling, even in terms of the food supply chain. Ang mga gardeners, they're subject to the machinations of traders. And I'm not saying we should do away with traders, but the problem is with our food supply chain, there are just so many layers of trading. Kaya from the market, and let's say 20 pesos ang presyo ng isang kamatis, ilang layers of trading ang pagdadaanan niya. Finally, when it reaches the market, it's so expensive. So lugi yung farmer because the traders dictate the prices, and lugi rin yung consumer. So again, we have to look into the systemic causes of the problems of the agricultural industry.
At saka sa importation, at saka sa smuggling na ito, Teddy, maraming sa ating mga kababayan magsasaka ang nawawalan ng hanap buhay, and many of them have lost their jobs. And of course, during this pandemic, many of our Filipino kababayans have also lost their jobs in many other industries. And right now, the economy is still weak and faces a long road to recovery. If you become senator, how will you try to jumpstart the economy and create jobs through legislation?
Well, nabanggit naman ni VP Lenny yung programa natin. Immediate na ayuda muna sa mga magsasaka. I think that's important. No? There are a lot of businesses who have shut down a lot, especially small and medium enterprises. So yun yung talagang kinakailangan bigyan muna ng support, no? Bailout, no? You might say so. And ganun rin doon sa mga farmers na affected by this rice tarification. So double whammy. Rice tarification, bread prices of palay, sabi nga ng isang kausap ko na magkasaka, it's no longer profitable for them to continue farming, and then tinamaan pa ng pandemic. No? So we need to provide them with immediate assistance. No? And then, as I've said, look at the systemic problems, no, of the agricultural industry. Land conversion is one. In terms also of a major investment program in agriculture in terms of infrastructure. In my 9 years as a congressman and also 15 years, no, in the local governments, wala pa ako nakakita talaga ng malaking investment program in agriculture. I remember we have roads to tourism areas, okay? Help the tourism industry. We even have roads for small and medium enterprises. Pero our farm-to-market roads, wala. Our irrigations, a lot of our agricultural lands are not irrigated the whole year round.
Pero Teddy, korupsyon, problema rin ba ito sa agrikultura?
Definitely. Corruption is pervasive everywhere, whether it's in industry.
Paano ba natin lalabanan ito? How do we fight it?
Well, ang importante muna is the leadership. That's very important because it begins, we're very personality-oriented. No? Ang laki ng ating tiwala sa Pangulo, whoever is elected as President, no? We place unto herself, no, the challenge of eradicating corruption, no, in the Philippines. Well, I always believe that corruption is dictated by our current political culture, no? Pero leadership really begins at the top because that's how we view our politicians. So if we're going to eradicate corruption, it begins first with the president, and then we have to look into our officials, the officials that we elect, and then the bureaucracy follows after. Because sometimes, no, sa ating kaugalian, no, may mga nagkasabi na ang corruption bahagi na yan ng kultura natin, which is not true, no? But yung mga give and take, you know, yung pakisama, those are the things I've noticed, no, in my years in government. It's very, very difficult to fight that culture of corruption because people equate it as something that is a Filipino value, which is not, no? Which is not. That's why sa akin, it really begins at the top, and then we have to look now into laws that will provide or will strengthen more transparency in government. Isang ang tinutulak ko, Rico, is freedom of information.
Right.
That's something that I think would be able to engender more citizen participation in governance and be able to prevent instances of corruption. Kasi nangyayari sa Pilipinas, no? Corruption happens and then we investigate it. But if we have a law, progressive law such as FOI, then the citizens will have access to information about government transactions. So sa simula pa lamang, we might be able to prevent acts of corruption.
Oo. Yung pet dog mo dyan sa bahay, tumatahol, Teddy. I think you really truly agrees with all the issues that you are sharing with us. Apart from agriculture, you have also been a champion for different progressive advocacies on women, LGBTQI+. How do you plan to further these initiatives in the Senate?
Well, there's this anti-discrimination bill that I've fought for in the House of Representatives, no? Yung sexual orientation and gender identity and expression, no? Law, maandar sa House pero hindi masyado sa Senado. No? So I think that's something that I will continue fighting for in the Senate. There's also this general anti-discrimination law, not just for the LGBT, but for all sectors who feel that they are marginalized or they are discriminated upon. No? Kasama na dyan ang katutubo, even senior citizens, persons with disabilities. So this is a general anti-discrimination law, which I think we might be able to pass in the Senate if we have more advocates, no, in the upper house.
Agriculture, anti-discrimination bill. What about sa droga, sa issue ng droga? How should the new government fight this war on drugs? Should it continue to adopt an ironclad, no-nonsense anti-drug policy?
Well, we have to look into the drug problem as a mental health problem. It's not just a matter of law enforcement. Of course, we always would have programs or a drive against criminality, a drive against drug addiction, but it's also a mental health problem. Kaya nga itong National Mental Health Law, which I was one of the authors, which is now passed, that's something that we can build upon, no? Because nagdodroga lang naman ang tao kung sila ay stressed, sila ay depressed. No? So when we look at health, it shouldn't be just the physical health, no? But also the mental health of Filipinos. It is also a social problem. Because of poverty, that's why people are forced to enter a life of crime, forced to be drug addicts. So those are the various dimensions of the drug problem. It's not just a law enforcement na kamaulang ang paraan, no? But we have to look also into the other social and mental health dimensions of the problem.
Teddy, before we end the first part of our interview, no, surveys are showing more familiar names leading this senatorial race. In the surveys that have been coming out, no? Wala ka pa sa top 12 because you're up against long-time political personalities, and even some of them are from political dynasties. It will really be an uphill battle for you.
Yeah, it's something that I acknowledge. Sa Senado naman, it's about resources and popularity. It's a popularity game usually, no? So definitely, political dynasties have the advantage of logistics, the name recall. But I'd like to think that there's also a significant number of Filipino voters who are also looking for fresh faces, more progressive ideas, fresh ideas. Like ako, I'm bringing in the perspective of a katatubo. A katatubo who fights for nature, who fights for the environment. That is something that we rarely discuss in the national halls of discourse, no? The climate action, no? Protection of our biodiversity. That is something that we, the Katatubo, can bring into the Senate.
And we will take this short break. We're speaking right now with former Congressman Teddy Bagilat. We will continue our conversation, up-close conversation with Teddy right after this. And we'll also give you a glimpse of what to expect once authorities allow more passengers in public transport tomorrow. Details next, right here on CNN Philippines. News you can use, news you can trust.
Sa'yo? Ba't nakasimangot ka? Alam ko na. Masakit ang katawan mo, ano? Sa sobrang trabaho? O di kaya masakit ang ulo sa sobrang stress? Break ka muna. Hinga ng malalim at imasahe ang ulo mo gamit ang Herbalaya Liniment Oil. Ako rin ganun eh. Kaya pag mataas ang tensyon sa trabaho, mag-Herbalaya break ka muna.
Herbalaya Liniment Oil. Amoy na kaaya-aya. Sa bawat pahid ay ginhawa.
Welcome back to the final word on CNN Philippines. I'm Rico Hizon. We still have with us for up close senatorial aspirant Teddy Bagilat. And Teddy, we have 2 minutes before the end of this interview, and I would like to ask you 6 questions, and please answer them with just a yes or a no. The first question is, do you favor easier public access to the statement of assets, liabilities, and net worth of the President, Vice President, and the members of Congress?
Yeah, definitely yes.
Do you support lifting foreign ownership limits in the Constitution?
No.
Do you favor the reimposition of the death penalty for drug-related crimes?
No.
Should a sitting president be allowed to run for vice president in the next election?
No.
Do you favor resuming peace talks with communist rebels?
Oh, yeah.
And should the country be more aggressive in protecting its maritime interests in the West Philippine Sea?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And finally, Teddy, a brief message on why our kababayan should vote for you in the Senate in 2022.
Let's bring in other voices, no? Representing indigenous peoples, representing the fight for nature, fight for the environment. This is something that I've been campaigning for the past 9 years in Congress. It's also bring in variety in our national discourse. Is the reason why we're not having a lot of progressive laws that address the roots of our problems is because we have the elite class in the Senate who are entrenched because they are the ones that are elected time and again. So it's high time that we bring in other voices from a variety of sectors, no, in our society into the Senate.
Thank you so much for joining us on Up Close, Senatorial Aspirant Teddy Bagilat.
O, anyari sa'yo? Ba't nakasimangot ka? Alam ko na. Masakit ang katawan mo, ano? Sa sobrang trabaho? O di kaya masakit ang ulo sa sobrang stress? Break ka muna. Hinga ng malalim at imasahe ang ulo mo gamit ang Herbalaya Liniment Oil. Ako rin ganun eh. Kaya pag mataas ang tensyon sa trabaho, mag-Herbalaya break ka muna.
Herbalaya Liniment Oil. Amoy na kaaya-aya. Sa bawat pahid ay ginhawa.
O, anyari sa'yo? Ba't nakasimangot ka? Alam ko na. Masakit ang katawan mo, ano? Sa sobrang trabaho? O di kaya masakit ang ulo sa sobrang stress? Break ka muna. Hinga ng malalim at imasahe ang ulo mo gamit ang Herbalaya Liniment Oil. Ako rin ganun eh. Kaya pag mataas ang tensyon sa trabaho, mag-Herbalaya break ka muna.
Herbalaya Liniment Oil. Amoy na kaaya-aya. Sa bawat pahid